he's hit this one, Miles. Great shot. Oh, it's a biggie. Straight over the top.
The Cricket Nuts.
You are listening to The Cricket Nuts, a podcast where we sit down and talk about a host of issues around cricket, the sport we all live and love. You should expect our views to be passionate, honest, emotional, and adequately analytical. On this show, you will hear Jay, Uday, and myself, Bishan, a motley crew from the fields of law, hospitality, and marketing, thrash it out on our common passion. Hello, everyone. Good day, and welcome to the first episode of our podcast where we discuss all things cricket and sometimes things non-cricket as well. With me is Uday and Jay. We're a bunch of sports buffs who think we can sound like experts. We'll introduce ourselves quickly for you. My name is Bishan Jaswant. I'm a lawyer by profession, but used to work with ESPN Cricinfo as a statistics sub-editor. Also used to do, and even do sometimes now, regular columns on sport. Used to do a weekly one called The Number Nut for Sportstar. Handing over to Jay.
Hi, this is Jay, long-time sports buff and been in marketing management for a while. Trying to bring some thoughts to your mind that are not going around otherwise. All the best.
Hi guys, this is Uday. Been a huge cricket fan since the 80s, possibly from the 87 Reliance World Cup. And love all things cricket. I own a restaurant and just enjoy every form of cricket.
Okay, so that's a little bit about us. Being the T20 World Cup season, we thought it would be a good time to look back at what the best T20 teams have been over the last few years. And maybe the first step to that discussion is to discuss the Cricket World Cup, the World T20 that started 2007 and has now become as big as it has, I suppose, partly due to India winning that first episode and giving birth to the IPL subsequently. So let's discuss the relevance, I'd say, of the T20 World Cup and the impact that it has on our minds in determining which the best T20 teams going around are. Jay, would you like to kick that off by giving us your thoughts of the T20 World Cup and the best teams?
Absolutely. As far as the T20 World Cup is concerned, 2007 was a watershed year for India, where we ended up winning it. Like you rightly said, Bishan, it actually gave a lot of impetus to the IPL, because when IPL came, nobody knew what to expect of IPL. The T20 World Cup, India winning the T20 World Cup, in fact, got IPL on the fast track almost instantly. So as far as the best teams are concerned, I think has pretty much been in sync with what has happened in T20 as well. So we haven't had too many surprises. We haven't had too many disappointments as well. So,
Uday, if I had to, let's say as a pop quiz, which team do you think has been in the most T20 finals? What was the first team?
I'd say Sri Lanka.
Who would you say?
I would say West Indies.
It is in fact Sri Lanka. They have won one World Cup, and I didn't think Sri Lanka would be an obvious answer for the reason that for many years now we haven't thought of them as a top T20 team or a top team in any format, but they've been to 3 finals more than any other team has. So, Uday, since you did say Sri Lanka, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about, I guess you think they're a decent team, which is why it came to your mind?
Yeah, I think Sri Lanka, at least in the initial days of T20, really cracked the code. They had swashbuckling Dilshan to open. Not sure Jayasuriya actually played the initial T20s, but Dilshan was a real force. Sangakkara, Jayawardene, they had some amazing finishers also down the order. And who I consider as the best T20 bowler I've seen, Malinga. I think Malinga's influence on T20 as a whole and Sri Lankan cricket have been just huge. I think he was in part responsible for their rise in T20 cricket and for them winning the World Cup that they did. And of course, they had the share of mystery bowlers. So Sri Lanka had a great team, maybe up to the last couple of years, where they've kind of been in decline.
And flown under the radar, almost always.
Yeah.
So can we call a team the best T20 team in obviously the last maybe 15 years or so since this format has been around, if they haven't been a force in the T20 World Cup, in the World T20? For example, England in one-day cricket, till they won the last World Cup, they may have been multiple finals in the past, but they hadn't really won a World Cup, and so we never considered them or called them a top ODI team. So can we consider teams like, say, Australia today, who are by all accounts a very good T20 unit with the bowling attack they have, whether it's Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood, Zampa, and they're batting with Smith and Warner and Finch and whatnot, is by all accounts a pretty good team. But would we consider them a top T20 team? Yeah.
The Australians, they are. They are in fact a top team in all forms of cricket, and that's how their system is. It's for them to adapt to a T20, like how they got the Big Bash League kicking. So the Aussies will always be a very, very good team. But as far as their adaptability to certain conditions are concerned, I think T20 cricket also lends itself to the vagaries of cricket. So therefore, we have those issues with the Australians. But otherwise, the Australians will always be a fantastic unit. That's basically because of the cricketing system they come from.
On the other end of the spectrum is West Indies, who are the only team to have won the T20 World Cup 2 times, right? And many teams like South Africa, New Zealand haven't even made a final, and West Indies have won 2 World Cups. Would that put them in contention to be the best T20 team ever in the last 15 years since the format has been around?
Possibly yes. Looking at their approach to the game, they've had. If you look at the 2007 World T20, the first one, the impact that Gale had with that 100 he scored. Of course, they went on to lose that game, but then the kind of power hitters they have, the fielding, and they've had their share of mystery spinners in Narayan and a couple of others. But I think West Indies seem to have cracked the code in terms of. At least in terms of their batting. I'm not so sure in terms of their bowling, and even though they won 2 World Cups, I wouldn't still call them the best team to have played, although the results might speak differently. What do you think, Bishan?
So for me, I think to be considered the best team in the format, you have to have had won enough of world tournaments, right? The pressure in world tournaments is definitely higher than what we have in bilaterals. Very often you're using the bilaterals as a testing ground for your teams to eventually play in the world tournament. So your success there is relevant, and which is why I'd say over the last 30 years during our growing up years of watching cricket, there's no doubt that Australia was the predominant team of the era, and that's largely because they won every world tournament there was year after year after year, right? 1999, 2003, 2007, they really dominated that, and there's no doubt that they were the best team. And the second best teams during that time were also, I feel, judged by their performance in World Cups. And India during that period, finalists in 2003, winning 2011, that decade is when India began coming into its own as well. And so for me, in my mind, performance in world tournaments is extremely important. And because West Indies have won twice, I find it very hard, of course, to say that they are the best T20 team ever, because they're very often a somewhat broken team, disunited, partly because of the doings of the board. They don't always get to play with their best team in tournaments across the world, in bilaterals especially. So for those reasons, it's hard to consistently call them the best team in the world. But when they want to put together their best 11, I think they have a best 11 that is as good as anybody in the world and could win on their day.
That's right, because if you look at the ICC member countries, all of them have pretty good T20 leagues today. So as far as the West Indies is concerned, yes, it's been a bit of a fractured, setup over the years. As far as their board is concerned, a lot of differences of opinions between the players and the board administrators. But their Caribbean Premier League has added hugely to their cricketing prowess in T20 at least. Likewise, I think all the other teams have done the same. If you look at the Bangladesh Premier League, it's pretty much the same thing. The Sri Lankan league also has done great things to their T20 pool of talent. So yeah, I mean, as far as the prominence or the winning likelihood of winning the T20 World Cup is concerned, I think all these top ICC member teams have a good chance of going into the last 4. As far as the other teams are concerned, I think they all are giving a pretty good account of themselves in the matches that they have played so far. In fact, even the associate member countries, because of the format that lends itself to the brand of cricket that's required, all of them have a good chance of doing well. So it's going to be a very, very exciting time as far as the World Cup is concerned. And going forward, I think all these guys are going to fine-tune their cricketing prowess in so many ways.
let's take this opportunity to maybe move into the next segment of this podcast. And while we have now discussed which teams have done well in the T20 World Cup over these years, let's try to make an assessment of what makes these teams tick. What's the formula that's found success for these teams? Because we've seen all different kinds of teams succeed, right? We just spoke about West Indies, who've clearly decided that it doesn't matter if you play out a few dot balls because we can smoke the sixes towards the end. You've had Sri Lanka, who were champions in 2014, who based their team on guys like Jayawardene, Sangakkara, Thirimanne, etc., who are a completely different brand of more solid, protective kind of cricket. So we know that all different types of cricket work. So let's maybe, of course, there will be some personal preferences that come in over here, but it may be interesting to hear what we think, each of us think is the formula for success that we have seen succeed with different teams.
I think batting heavy is still probably the way to go in a T20 game, because you definitely need those big runs to have a chance. So while you definitely need strong bowlers, maybe as we know, Test match lengths don't really work in T20 cricket. You need bowlers who probably are able to bowl their variations more effectively and have a good short ball. And so I'd still say slightly batting heavy with an assortment of some mystery spinners or out and out pacers who can vary their lengths. Is the way to go for me from what I've seen. I'm happy to hear what Jay has to say.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the teams are concerned, team composition is concerned, I still feel balance is the way to go. Balance because of the fact that batsmen are anyway going to go bang bang in T20 cricket, and I don't believe, I don't feel that any batsman needs to score high 50s or big half centuries or even anything close to that. Even if they score quick runs in the 20s and 30s, I think a T20 team can be home and dry. As far as the composition is concerned, I still feel balance is the way to go.
So, see, there's no two ways about the fact that you can't have a bowling lineup that concedes 200 runs every match, because then however good your batting is, you're not going to win that match more often than not.
Absolutely.
But we have seen different styles of batting work, right? Like we said, Sri Lanka, West Indies follow different styles. Both have been champions. Now, then I think the next step to consider is how long do you want your batting lineups to be? Many teams go top heavy, and some teams decide to have a batting lineup that extends all the way up to 7-8. Do we need batsmen up to 7 and 8 in this format, or can we do with a top heavy batting lineup with more bowlers? So the way I see it is, bowling attacks of teams that have won tournaments have not necessarily blasted the opposition out, right? Whether when India won 2007, you had guys like R.P. Singh, Joginder Sharma, Sreesanth, Irfan Pathan, Yusuf Pathan. That's not a world-beating bowling lineup.
Absolutely.
When Sri Lanka won the World Cup, they had guys like Senanayake, Herath, right, Kulasekara, etc. Again, who are not world-beating bowlers. And West Indies, while batting has been their strength, even they have had guys a lot of the time like Bravo and Brathwaite and Sammy who've taken the bowling along. So, but what all of these teams had, in my opinion, is more than 5, 6, 7 bowlers, right? So that they didn't always have to have 5 bowlers bowling 4 overs each. There was always plenty of variety, a reasonable standard, but enough variety, which then means that you cannot have batting more often than not up till 7 or 8. So for me, that's the formula that works. Because it's T20 cricket, in 20 overs, you will usually not need your 8th batsman or 7th batsman to perform. So you can have a top-heavy batting lineup, but bowling at least 6 bowling options is the formula that, in my mind, seems to work more than not.
If I were to be a selector picking a T20 team, I would have my tailenders batting too. I would want even the number 11 batsman to be batting, to be getting runs if it's asked of him. So as far as I'm concerned, there has to be, along with balance, the team really needs to bat deep and deep till number 11.
But Jay, if I can just maybe follow that up, how many matches do we see batsmen 9, 10 and 11 really have to contribute to make a difference? In a test match, Yes, because you have unlimited overs and they can really contribute if they have the batting skill.
That's right.
In a T20 match, it's often 1 over, 5 balls or something like that at most. So why do you think the tail needs to bat?
Well, I feel so because the format doesn't call for long stays at the wicket. But as far as the game and the way the game goes, there will be situations where the team really would have to bat deep in the sense that there could be a number 11 batsman who is facing a scenario where he has to score 12 runs in the last over. So he needs to put bat to ball. Every single ball that he's going to face, he has to whack it. And so there has to be a culture in T20 cricket wherein, because this is also coming from the fact that you had guys like Dale Steyn, tear away quick, always bowled in the high 140s, not doing well with the bat on many occasions for RCB, for instance, or as far as the IPL goes, was so many other occasions. So it's one of those things that when you pick a T20 team, you need guys who can do. I'm not saying they need to be like frontline batsmen at the fag end of the innings, whether you're batting first or batting second, but they need to contribute. So we need guys who are your main bowlers, batting and getting runs towards the end as well.
Uday, to close out the segment, your views on this, just to if the lower order has to bat, right, it then means that at some level you have to compromise on the bowling, because if you have two bowlers, one is a slightly worse bowler than the other but can bat, and other one is a top quality bowler but can't bat. If Jay was selector, Jay would pick the guy who can bat a bit. So, which at some level, if we do that consistently, we will compromise on the bowling. Do you think that works in T20? Because we discussed earlier, maybe batting is more important in the format. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think while batting is important in the format, as you said earlier, you cannot have a bowling unit which is susceptible to giving 190 to 200 runs during their bowling innings. So I'd say it's definitely important to have at least 6 to 7 bowlers, which could include 2 or 3 part-timers. In the batting, I'm not sure if Jay would agree, and you guys might notice in many of the podcasts that Jay and I may not agree on something. But in one of the aspects that I think that the batting needs is just one solid batsman around whom the other batsmen revolve. So it is a format essentially where everybody has to go slam bang in the batting. But I've noticed in the 2007 World Cup, for example, the role Gautam Gambhir played, or in the 2014 World Cup, or rather was it the 2016 World Cup, the role that Marlon Samuels played. I think you need a batsman who's going to be your rock solid player around whom the rest of the batting goes slam bang, and you don't really necessarily have to have a batting lineup that extends all the way up to 8 or 9. If your top 7 or 8 can do the job, you definitely need a bowling lineup where at least 6 to 7 of your players bowl. That's extremely important, is my view.
Okay, so on that low note, let's try and move into the next segment of this podcast, which is, and we may get to delve a little bit into individual players in this segment. Why have certain teams not done well in T20 cricket, and while certain others have succeeded? Is it because they haven't got the formula right, the formula we've been discussing in the last segment? Or is it because they just haven't had the players to execute formulas? What is it? To give an example, we would have expected Australia, the predominant force of the last couple of decades, to have made more than just one T20 World Cup final, which they lost, right? So that's clearly a format in which they've underperformed, while teams like West Indies, even Sri Lanka, who are by no means in the last 15 years the dominant forces in cricket generally, they've succeeded. So is it because they just haven't had the players? Do we need specialist players for the formats? Australia just haven't had the people. Same for South Africa, New Zealand. What is it, Jay?
Well, as far as Australia are concerned, they've always had a good team. But why, if you really ask why they haven't been able to reach the finals or win T20 World Cups, it's purely because of the fact that on the day, they've been beaten by slightly better teams who played better on that day. As far as their team composition is concerned, you always see them at the opener. You always see the openers. One of them going bang bang, and the others kind of trying to play a slightly conventional kind of cricket. I have not seen a single Aussie team that really plays T20 the way T20 should be played. So gone are the days of I remember Adam Gilchrist's time when they used to go reasonably okay till Adam Gilchrist. I think he used to open the innings in T20. So that's something that they had. Today, I think apart from David Warner, I don't think they have guys who can do exactly what these guys used to do.
What do you think about Maxwell?
Glenn Maxwell, yes. I mean, it's again, see, the format doesn't really allow you to be yourself all the time, to express yourself the way you want to do express yourself. Therefore, I think none of these teams are unbeatable. And why the Aussies haven't come thus far, not done justice to their billing, justice to their inherent cricketing talent, is purely because of the fact that the other countries have caught up with the format better than the Aussies.
I'll probably just add to what Jay said. Just that I think in Australia's case, as well as possibly in the case of New Zealand, while batting has more or less been their forte, I think in terms of their bowling, I don't think they've had a sense of mystery, or they've really looked at developing their bowling to the T20 game. While Mitchell Starc is a great Yorker specialist and has the pace required, for example, you don't really see a bowler who's going to instill that kind of fear in the opposing team, where they feel, okay, we're going to struggle to get to a particular score against this bowling lineup. And the same applies to New Zealand too. I feel both Australia and New Zealand haven't really sorted out their bowling issues over the past few World Cups, and that's one of the main reasons I think that they have not really succeeded. I don't see real concern in terms of their batting, but the bowlers mixing up their lengths or an assortment of slower deliveries or just that unknown quality, I think, is missing in both the Australian and New Zealand bowling lineups. What do you think, Bishan?
I think I have a couple of points to make here. One is, my sense is that Australia have not taken T20 cricket as seriously as some of the countries across the world have. I mean, sure, they have the Big Bash, which is a strong franchise level T20 tournament, but the country in general, I don't think has accepted it as a format that really tests your mettle, in which they really want to be world number one. And I think that's part of the reason where you see players being rested and haven't given themselves the opportunity to build T20 specialists. If you look at the lists of top players, top run scorers, top wicket takers in a T20 World Cup, you will see it filled with players from Pakistan and Sri Lanka, whether it's Mendes or Malinga, Omar Gul, Saeed Ajmal, right? So you will find very few Aussies, South Africans, New Zealanders who are in the top few in those lists. And I suppose a part of it is to do with having the personnel to attack the format, and maybe they just haven't had, which is why they don't feature on these lists or haven't made an impression in world cricket. But two is wanting to succeed in that format and really taking it seriously. And surely that's changing over time. You will remember the first T20 that was played, New Zealand versus Australia, where they played in those wigs and retro clothing. That's clearly no longer the case, and everyone's taking it more seriously. The World T20 has more meaning. Many players are playing only the format. So I think you will see it change. But in my opinion, these are the reasons why you've seen some teams overperforming and some underperforming. Like West Indies have just taken the opportunity to come back to the world stage. They knew that it wasn't happening in Test cricket, one-day cricket, but here's a format where they could shine. So they took it seriously because they wanted to and they needed to. But some countries didn't, because maybe they didn't need to.
I think as far as the Australians are concerned, in spite of the Big Bash League, they have not been able to really get up to speed with what's happening in T20 cricket worldwide otherwise. Part of the reason I feel is that even if you look at Big Bash League, you will hardly see any foreign players playing in the Big Bash League. You will see a couple of Sri Lankans, a couple of West Indians, no Indians whatsoever.
I think they have a
couple of
rule
Pakistanis.
where only two international players can play.
And Indians can't play there anyway because the BCCI doesn't give them an objection.
So the Australians haven't really caught up with the rest of the world as far as international T20 is concerned, because they haven't been in a situation where they're getting to see too many guys playing T20 in a league at home. And part of the reason, the other part of the reason is that, like what Bishan said earlier, they haven't taken T20 cricket as something that they need to focus on, because ICC mandates that the you have T20 cricket as part of as one format of cricket. So therefore they play T20 format. Beyond that, they haven't focused on T20 as a format. I completely agree with Bishan on that.
Okay, so let's maybe move into the last segment of today's podcast to discuss, since we are now at World T20 season, let's look forward to the next World T20 and maybe try to make an assessment based on what we've seen of who's going to win the next World T20, who are going to be the biggest teams, the best challengers for that tournament. Jay,
I think Indians will always have an advantage when it comes to T20 thanks to IPL. And as far as the other teams are concerned, you will always see teams with a strong cricketing structure getting into the last 4 in all T20 World Cups. So that it's just a matter of adapting to the conditions they're playing in. So I still feel Indians and the other top 4 to 5 teams would always be in the reckoning.
Personally, I'm quite happy to hear Jay talking about the IPL because I know how much he dislikes it. But, yeah, I think I agree with him that India is always going to be a strong title contender. West Indies always in my book, and as the underdogs and the ones who are always going to challenge. Pakistan for me look like a perfect T20 team. They have the wherewithal when it comes to their bowling. The fantastic quality of Babar and Fakhar Zaman and guys like Hafiz who contribute with both bat and ball. I think Pakistan are a fantastic team and always a force in every T20 World Cup. So I think they're the team to always look out for. And I love the fast bowling talent that comes out of there. Just some amazing bowlers and players coming out of there. Vishen?
Yeah, to mention one team that you guys didn't, which I thought deserved a mention maybe, was England. England, in my opinion, over the last 5 years are the most improved limited overs format team. In the 2015 World Cup, at the end of that World Cup, they got a lot of flack for their style of cricket and that it was outdated. And they really revamped the entire system to make sure that their white ball cricket is at par or better than the rest of the world. They got their success in the 2019 World Cup, the 50-over World Cup, not maybe in the circumstances they would have wanted to, but they are on paper champions. And even in T20 cricket, you can see that they play a brand of fearless cricket that I think no other team apart from maybe West Indies do. And I would say that England's approach has more method to it than West Indies does. It's more scientific in the way they go about it. And I think it's a style that Jay really appreciates, which is number 1 to number 7. Everyone goes slam bang. There's nobody who's trying to slow the team down. And it so happens, we discussed in the previous segment as well, they have the personnel to execute that. Unless you have a Joss Butler, Bairstow, a Jason Roy, a Moeen Ali, a Morgan, each one of whom can score a 15 ball 50, and so they have the personnel to execute that. So I think they're really a team that's up there, and they also have, fortunately, a lot of all-rounders, which in this format is extremely helpful because, again, something I touched upon earlier, I like to have variety in the bowling attack, and with people like Moeen Ali and Ben Stokes, who are really out-and-out batsmen, they're extremely good bowlers as well. So that really gives you a lot of variety and adds balance to the team. So, and they have real raw pace as well when they want it. Guys like Jofra Archer and Mark Wood are extremely quick. So I think they have everything that you'd want from a top T20 team. So I think they're a real force to reckon with. Apart from India, for the reasons that Jay said, with the IPL, you will obviously have a strong Indian team at all times. And I think India also has accepted the format. You can see that they're willing to send 2 teams in different parts of the world to play different formats. So that India as a country has accepted that that's the way the world is going to possibly go, and to have specialists. So for that reason, for having adapted and embraced the format, India as well. So I think that's where I'd sum it up.
I'd just like to add that it'd be lovely to see South Africa finally win an ICC tournament. Such a talented team over the years, which is sadly lost players like De Villiers and Faf du Plessis for various reasons. But to just see them perform well in this format would be good. They have the resources, some good younger players. Hopefully they'll have the mental strength to be able to pass the finishing line sometime soon. But a very talented bunch of players, some great fast bowlers, and now Shamsi and Maharaj being amongst the good slow bowlers also. I'm hoping that they'll come good in the World Cups to come.
I think like what Bishan rightly said, England's cricketing system has been a classical one. They have adapted very, very well to all the new formats of cricket. If you look at the teams over the years, I mean, their whole cricketing system is run around the fact that they need to play cricket correctly. Barring names like a Neil Fairbrother or an Ian Botham, much before that, we haven't seen too many batsmen coming out of England that really throws the bat around. When a Ben Stokes does that, he does it with a lot of method. So England will always be a force. England has got tremendous adaptability. They have got very good bowling, except in the spin department where they are woefully short of both finger spin and wrist spin. I don't think the ones that the bowlers, spin bowlers that they have is going to make any impact in any T20 game. But yes, I mean, like Uday touched on the South Africans. There has been a decline in cricket overall in South Africa. I mean, all these countries, cricket is not the first sport, whether it's England, South Africa, or Australia. Cricket probably have about 20% of the total sport following in these countries. Possibly a little more than that, with teams doing better when it comes to Australia and England. South Africa has always flattered to deceive, like Uday said. Let's hope that some semblance of balance prevails in the cricketing world. India, of course, we all want India to win. That's a different matter altogether. But as cricket lovers, as sports lovers, we need a playing field that is fairly even, and we don't want to see one country pummeling the other country to submission. That's not what we want to see. We want to see a good game. We want to see a good game of cricket, a good game of T20, and let's hope that we get that.
On that note, let's draw a close to this first podcast on the optimistic note that Uday left about South Africa possibly winning the World Cup. And Jay, I think Adil Rashid may have something to say to you about their spin department.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure of that. I hope they pick him.
Back with our next episode soon, guys. Cheers.